Hey there, time for today's math lesson. So you notice today we've got a new property we're going to be talking about. It's called the associative property. And associative property has that word associate in it, which means who you hang around with, who you're grouped with. And that's really what this is. It's all about grouping. And with the associative property, the commutative property, the identity property, and the zero property, multiplication can be easy. So let's talk about using the associative property to multiply three numbers. Oh.
How can you multiply three numbers? Think about this question during the lesson. What does a row mean? In which direction does a row go? A row goes across. Look at the quilt sections in the picture. How many rows are there in each quilt section? There are 2 rows in each quilt section. How many factors are in this quilt example? There are 3 factors in this example. There are 3 sections, each containing 2 rows of 4 squares. Drew has to join 3 sections of a quilt. Each section has 2 rows with 4 squares in each row. How many squares in all are in these 3 sections? What are the 3 factors you should use? The 3 factors are 3, 2, and 4.
You can multiply to find the total for an array.
How do you think multiplying 3 factors will be different from multiplying 2 factors? When you multiply 3 factors, you will have to multiply twice. When you multiply 2 factors, you have to multiply only once. One way to solve this is to find 3 times 2 first. By grouping 3 times 2, you get 6 rows with 4 squares in each row. What is the answer? There are 24 squares in the quilt. Using this first method, what did you multiply to find the total number of rows? You multiply the 2 rows in each quilt section by 3 quilt pieces. After multiplying 2 by 3 to obtain 6 as the total number of rows, by what number do you multiply 6 in order to find the total number of squares? You multiply 6 rows by the 4 squares in each row. Another way to solve this is to compute 2 times 4 first. By grouping 2 times 4, you get 3 sections with 8 squares in each section. There are 24 squares in Drew's quilt pieces. Using this second method, what total did you find? When you multiply 2 times 4, you find the total number of squares in one quilt section. Then what total do you determine when you multiply 3 times 8? When you multiply 3 times 8, you determine the total number of squares in 3 quilt pieces. What property says that you can change the grouping of the factors and the product will be the same? The associative grouping property of multiplication says that you can change the grouping of the factors and the product will be the same. You know now how to multiply with 3 factors. How would you multiply 5 times 6 times 7? Try it yourself.
So I know that the video was kind of long and kind of went on for a while and maybe a little confusing, but let's go through this. If we look at this, this is the story they were talking about, and this is the quilt that we have. And we have 3 different sections in this quilt. Now each of those sections has 2 rows. So it's 3 groups of 2. But there's also 4 in each row. So it's 3 groups of 2 with 4 in each one. And how do we figure that out? Well, this is where we use the associative property. And the associative property uses something called the parentheses. These things right here. Parentheses. And we use those with distributive property too. When we broke down, like, excuse me, when we broke a 6, let's say we're doing 6 times 4, and we, that's a great looking 4, 6 times 4, and we broke it into 5 times 4 plus, and we grouped that 1 times 4, okay? So these parentheses you've seen before, and we use those in the associative. Now the thing is, it doesn't matter where you put the parentheses. You can say, let's put these 2 guys together. Or somebody else might say, no, I want to do 2 times 4 and put those 2 together. It doesn't matter. You'll get the same answer. So we'll look at it like this. You always do what's inside the parentheses first. So 2 times 4 is 8. And now you basically have 3 times 8. And if you remember from the page before, 3 times 8 is going to be 24. Now just to show you that you get the same answer if you group it the other way, we'll do 3 times 2 times 4. And we'll group the 3 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 4 is also 24. So it doesn't matter how you group them. Think of the associative property as grouping, grouping, and they even call it the grouping property here. Let's look at the convince me. Use the associative property to show 2 different ways to find 5 times 2 times 3. They want you to do here what we just did here. So let's do 5 times 2 times 3. Let's group the 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. And 10 times 3 is 30. Another way to do it. 5 times 2 times 3. And let's say the 2 and the 3 are best friends. So now we've got 5 times. We're going to multiply that. Make it 6. 5 times 6 is 30. Did you get the same answer? Yes. What can you generalize? Which means, what's a statement you can make about this? It doesn't matter how you group the numbers. You get the same answer. All right, let's look up here at the guided practice. Do you understand? Do you understand? Sarah has 4 pages of stickers in an album. Each page has 3 rows with 2 stickers on each row. How many stickers are in Sarah's album? You may use objects to help. Well, if you're at home and you've got objects, you can actually lay this out. Get 4 pieces of paper, put 3 rows, 2 stickers in each row, and we'll figure that out. Or we can do it with math. So she has 4 groups of, and there's 3 rows of 2. So 4 groups of 3 times 2. 3 groups of 2 times 4, however you want to look at it. And with associative property, we can group these however we want. I'm going to go 4 times 3. And I'm going to say, well, that's 12. And now 12 times 2 is 12 plus 12. So she has 24. Billy concludes the product is the answer to a multiplication problem. The product of 2 times 3 times 5 is not equal to the product of 2 times 3 times 5. Is Billy correct? It's the same numbers. He just used the associative property, grouped them differently. Now we know from right here that it doesn't matter how you group them, you get the same answer. So Billy says that it's not equal. Is he right? No, Billy is wrong. Why is Billy wrong? You can group in any way and you get the same answer. That's what the associative property says. All right, do you know how? So you're going to use the associative property to figure out the missing number. You don't have to get the answer. You just have to figure out the missing number. And we're not changing any of the numbers. This is actually pretty easy because you keep the same numbers. All that's moving is those parentheses, moving around these numbers or moving around these numbers. So we got 2 times 4 times 2 is the same as 2 times 4 times, well, it's the 2. 3 times 4 times 3 is the same as 3 times 4 times 3. Again, we're not changing any numbers, just where the parentheses are. 2 times 3 is the same as 2 times 2 times 3. 3 times 2 times 4 is the same as 3 times 2 times 4. So the associative property, it's actually pretty easy and it's really helpful too. I kind of like this more than distributive. Distributive helps out too, breaking those bigger numbers and adding that together. But this is kind of neat because there's not really any rules. You can group whichever numbers you want and it's going to help you get the same answer. And maybe somebody else groups them a different way, but again, you're going to get the same answer. Associative property, hope it helps you out.